many ways, launching the iTunes Music Store was actually a bigger accomplishment than launching the iPod in terms of the complication. There's so many different details. For one song, there could be 5 different rights holders, and all of those people have to come to the table. Everyone has to sign the dotted line, and then to take all of that licensing and to put it into a format that has one price. This is really Herculean.
Jobs' hard work paid off. Within 5 days of its launch, the iTunes Music Store sold more than 1 million songs. Steve Jobs and Apple had accomplished something that no other company could, offering consumers a digital music player with a dedicated music store. That same day, Jobs made another announcement that further helped the iPod's growth.
Thank you. It's our 3rd generation. No one's even caught up with our 1st generation yet, and we're introducing our 3rd.
It was the first iPod to offer full PC compatibility. Now, anyone with a computer could use an iPod.
The iPod was just for Mac fans, and it was a big success with Mac people. Steve Jobs let it percolate for a while, let the demand build, let the interest build, let the media build. But when Apple made it Windows compatible, hundreds of millions of people could try this thing out, and that's when the iPod just went nuts.
When Apple allowed the iPod to be PC compatible, the rush to use it was phenomenal. It was almost as if the PC users wanted a piece of Apple, wanted a bite of the apple. They wanted the coolness and the creativity that Apple had always stood for.
There's a big change in Apple's mindset. I mean, they were always hoping that the iPod would be a way to sell more Macs. But when they made it a Windows device, they threw that strategy out the window. They just decided, you know, okay, we'll focus on the iPod. Let's make that the big seller.
For a long time, Mac people and Windows people had this sort of cocktail party thing going on where the Mac people would say, you know, my Mac is so elegant and so beautiful, rounded corners on the screen image. I mean, little crossfades when you copy or delete an icon on the screen. It's beautiful. And the Windows person would go, but I can get a Dell for $400. You know, total disconnect. They totally do not understand each other. It's red state, blue state. It's Hummer, Prius. It's total disconnect. But the thing about the iPod was the iPod introduced those Windows PC people to the joy of having something that worked right, worked every time, and was beautiful.
The iPod's $1 billion business in 2 years. That's got to get our attention.
In the summer of 2004, we realized in Newsweek the iPod was much more than a product. It was really becoming a cultural phenomenon. So we set out to do a cover story on it. And as it turned out, Steve Jobs, he had that same realization too. And he told me that a few months before, he had been in New York City and was walking down Madison Avenue. And he saw people walking down the street, and one by one, they had the earbuds. You go down the block, then there'd be another, then there'd be another, another. And he said to himself, oh my God, it's starting to happen.
iPod sales skyrocketed. By the end of 2004, Apple had sold 200 million songs from the iTunes Music Store and over 6 million iPods. In 2005, sensing its growing popularity, Jobs aggressively launched new iPod models and updated existing versions. It seemed there was an iPod in every size and for most sizes of wallet.
You ever wonder what this pocket's for? I've always wondered that. Well, now we know, because this is the new iPod Nano.
The strategy that Steve Jobs has was that once he had the first player out, it was just expanding more and more to meet every style, taste, preference, price point. So it makes it very hard for different competitors to come in and attack niches or market opportunities because they're basically trying to cover the whole gamut of consumer taste.
Then in October 2005, Apple released the 5th generation iPod with a feature that even Jobs had his doubts about. It was the first iPod that could play video.
In October of 2005, Apple did something that Steve Jobs said they were never going to do, which was add support for video to the iPod. Steve had said for a long time that the experience of watching video on a portable device is never going to be as satisfactory or as integral as audio is going to be.
Steve Jobs was against a video iPod in public, but he's also this master gamesman. So the idea was that by talking against video assets or integrating video into an iPod, it would discourage other competitors from aggressively moving into the area. So that's kind of the conspiracy theory behind it.
In 2005, Apple released 4 new iPods across 4 different price points. Again, the strategy worked. That year, Apple sold 32 million iPods. That's 1 every second. The company reported that iPod sales made up 40% of the UK market, 45% in Canada, and 58% in Australia. Perhaps most important, it had a 75% ownership of the lucrative American MP3 player market.
When you look at Apple's market share, and they've held this 3/4 market share for 5 years now, and in any other business, if you've got 30% of the market share, that's huge. 75% is absolutely unheard of. And the reason is Apple has stayed ahead of their competitors. They've introduced products that were simply unmatched in the market.
In September 2006, the iTunes Music Store sold its 1.5 billionth song. It now sells more than 3 million songs every day. Apple is the 5th largest music retailer in the US. And in 2006, iTunes held 44% of the digital music market in the UK, more than 3 times its nearest competitor.
The digital downloads are still a fraction of the CD business. Let's be clear, they're not overtaking Walmart anytime in the near future because there's still a lot more CDs sold. But the fact that even they're on the charts, the fact that they're in the rankings is absolutely amazing. If 5 years ago I said, 5 years from now the 5th largest music distributor is going to be Apple, you would probably have suggested I go lie down for a while.
Within a week of announcing that iTunes would offer full-length feature films, Apple sold more than 125,000 digital movies, making it clear the company is ready to tackle the digital film business as well. But the iPod's success is fueled by more than clever engineering and savvy marketing. This little device somehow seems to inspire passion in its owners. In just 4 years, the iPod went from a concept to an economic juggernaut. But perhaps the thing that distinguishes the iPod most is people's bizarre love for the gadget.
The fact that 80% of Microsoft employees who have music players are said to have iPods rather than the ones running Microsoft software is a telltale sign.
The iPod has gone to a cult-like status. It's something that people have affection for. Even as products become technically competitive, consumers want the iPod brand. They don't want anything else.
Today, users are showing love for their iPods in all sorts of ways. Some owners create homemade commercials, like this one from an iPod owner in California. Others pay an online business to turn their photos into personalised iPod ads.
Oh, his face is great. That kid's face is great.
And some iFanatics upload pictures of their iPods to a worldwide virtual photo gallery. Over 4,000 iPod owners have proudly posted pics of their beloved white devices for everyone to admire. Other fans are so fascinated with what the future holds for the iPod that they're mocking up and posting their own versions of possible next-generation iPods, such as this full-screen video iPod.
They care about the iPod. You don't see them mocking up what the next, HP laptop is going to be. It's only the iPod that people seem to do this with.
And at universities around the world, they're even teaching classes on it. Dr. Michael Bull, nicknamed Professor iPod, teaches at the University of Sussex.
Now, for the first time, this has meant people can construct their own auditory sound world wherever they go.
On some university campuses, the iPod influences the social dynamic.
There's a funny story. Duke University a couple years ago started a pilot program where every incoming freshman was issued an iPod, as an educational tool, mind you. So the upperclassmen were somewhat resentful seeing these freshmen walk around with their free iPods, and the white earbuds branded them as freshmen. So the upperclassmen who had iPods began to go shop for earbuds in other colors so people wouldn't think that they were freshmen.
The socialization of the iPod in youth culture is really important. It's an important part of their success. And the iPod kind of started this culture of the playlist and what the playlist has started to mean. So when you were able to suddenly create your playlist like a DJ, then suddenly everybody, your friends started to know you based on the kinds of playlists that you were creating and publishing. And it became an extension of who you are.
They did this survey recently where trying to figure out what the most popular thing is on college campuses. It's always beer. Every year it's beer. The last one that they did, the iPod has actually surpassed beer as the most popular thing on college campuses.
All this love for the iPod translates into big business, and not just for Apple. The device has given birth to a cottage industry of over 3,000 accessories, from iPod cases and car adapters to iPod pets and docking stations designed to keep your iPod close at all times. This iPod ecosystem is expected to generate sales of more than $1 billion.
I heard an analyst say Apple can't maintain its market share with this iPod. You know what? I think he's wrong. The average iPod owner spends like $100 on accessories, car adapters, the FM radio attachment, and then there's all the music they bought from Apple's music store online. Those songs will only work on the iPod. That's an investment that they're not going to junk for some other player.
In the iPod, Steve Jobs has achieved the Holy Grail. A product that has become a cultural phenomenon and a billion-dollar business.
I think the iPod gives people this amazing, unprecedented level of power and personalization. And it's a lot of power that they've never felt before. And so they love this product, and it becomes an extension of their identity.
I think, what the iPod did is it gave people a way to relate to their music that was new, and it let them rediscover a lot of the stuff they already had and help them listen to it in different ways and consume their music in a way that they were never able to before. And that makes you feel good when you're like, I'm into music again. I'm carrying music around like I never did before. I'm discovering stuff I own. And you associate that good feelings with the iPod. Because the main thing it does is it doesn't get in between you and your music.
Just like the Sony Walkman revolutionized portable music listening 20 years ago, in the digital age, the iPod is doing exactly the same thing.
And it all started with a smile.
From Steve's perspective, he's finally got respect. And the iPod is what did it. Here he had championed something that people had thought, wow, you're a little crazy to do an MP3 player. And now the thing had become a phenomenal success. Apple was always considered a sort of a novelty, an interesting piece outside the main game being Microsoft and Windows and the PC world. The iPod has brought Apple into everybody's life. This is a big change, and I think it's going to lead to gigantic things for Apple. I think they've only just begun.